The Rebbe starts off the Sicha by saying that in regards to the fact that the Torah starts off with a Beis, Bereishis, Bora, etc., not with an Aleph, which is the first of the letters of the Aleph Beis, we know that there's a number of explanations. To mention a few of them. In the Yerushalmi it says, because Aleph is an expression in a Rosh Tevis of the word Arira, which is a curse. Beis, on the other hand, is an expression, it's a Rosh Tevis of bracha, blessing. And this is why the Torah starts with a Beis rather than an Aleph. In the Medrash it says that the shape of the letter Beis is closed from all three sides, open on the fourth side, the northern side. This is similar to the world itself, which is created in a way that on three sides it is closed. The northern side remains open. The reason being is, if someone should come along and say that he is Hashem, we would tell him, on the contrary, there's this northern side, the part of the world that was never finished off, that needs fixing. Let's see if you could come along and complete it. A third reason is given in Kabbalah, and it says that the Torah, as we learn it down here in this world, is the Torah the way it's already come down from the world of Atzilus down into the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. As is known in the words that we say in benching, Val Teirascha Shali Madatanu, the Torah that you have taught us, your Torah refers to the Torah the way it's in Atzilus. Shali Madatanu is the Torah the way it came down into the world of Bria. And this is why the Torah starts over the base to hint that the Torah, the way we have it, that's already the second level of Torah. However, the Aleph, the first level of Torah, that's the way Torah is in Atzilus. The Rebbe says, seemingly, we need to have explanation for each one of these three reasons. In regards to the first reason, which we said that the Beis is the Rosh Tevis of Bracha, the question is, as the Even Ezra in fact asks, we find plenty of other words that start with Beis that are the opposite of Bracha. On the other hand, we also have quite a number of words that start with an Aleph, which do represent good things and brachos and so on. In regards to the second answer, the shape of the Beis being similar to the shape of the world, so the Rebbe says, the fact that Torah seemingly should have started with an Aleph is because this would have been the rational, logical Seder according to Torah. If Aleph is the first letter of the Aleph Beis, it shows it's definitely the highest, the greatest, also in its mila, in its quality. So if that's the case, if Torah, mitzad the Seder, the order of Torah, it should have started with an Aleph, it's very difficult to say that Torah is changing its order, starting with a Beis, just to be able to fit in, so to speak, with the world, with the shape of the world. And the world is like the shape of a Beis. That's why the Torah starts with a Beis. If anything, it goes the other way around. The world was created for Torah, and through Torah, the Razal tell us, Hashem looks into the Torah and creates the world. Bereishis, as we know, is Bishvil HaTorah. The world was created for the Torah that's called Reishis. Not Chas v'Shalom, the other way around, that the Torah is written in a way because it needs to fit into the world. In regards to the third answer, the answer that the Torah, the way we have it, is already a step down, the way it came down into the world of Bria. So the Rebbe says, we know that we say the bracha v'nosan lanu es Torah. Hashem gave us His Torah, which means that the very same Torah and the same order of Torah, as it is by Hashem, Torah, that's the way He gave it to us down here, which would tell us that just like the Torah by us starts with a Beis of Bereishis, so too the Torah within the world of Atzilus, and even in the worlds higher than Atzilus, in any world where there's the possibility for the idea of oisius, of words, of letters, it would start with a Beis. So the question then is, we said before, the reason our Torah starts with a Beis because it's down in the world of Bria, a step down at stage number 2. But really what should really come out is that Torah on any level, wherever it is, it's always starting with a Beis. Even the Torah in Atzilus. But why would the Torah in Atzilus, or even higher than Atzilus, start with a Beis? The Rebbe says another question. From all of these explanations that we just said, it seems to come out that Torah needs to specifically start with a Beis and not with an Aleph. But we have a Gemara, a story in the Gemara. Talmai HaMelech wanted the Torah should be translated for him. Hashem made a tremendous miracle that all of the Zekanim, all of the 70 elders, translated it in exactly the same way. And in some cases, there were slight, certain little variations or changes. In the first pasuk, rather than translating Bereishis, Bara, Elokim in that order, the Gemara tells us that they translated it as if it would have said Elokim, Bara, Bereishis. which would mean that they translated, Elohim starts with the Aleph, of course, rather than the Beis of Bereishis. So the Rebbe says like this: since Milamayla, from Hashem, it was given in the idea to these Zakenim to translate it as if it says Elohim bara Bereishis, meaning starting off with an Aleph, that itself tells us that there's a very strong and good reason that Torah should in fact start with an Aleph, and that's why it ended up being translated to Talmai HaMelech that way, to the extent that any explanations would have not been accepted and understood by Talmai HaMelech. And therefore a miracle had to happen that they should all start it off with an Aleph, because that's the only way it makes sense. That it would make sense by Talmai HaMelech. Furthermore, the Rebbe says, and this the Rebbe says is the most surprising thing, in Torah Emes, there's a number of reasons, as we just explained, for the fact that the Torah does not start with an Aleph, and yet none of these would be able to be understood by Talmai HaMelech. So what's going on over here? In other words, on the one hand, we're saying, yes, the Torah must start with a Beis, and somehow with the Torah, the way it's translated to Talmai HaMelech, it absolutely must start with an Aleph. How do we understand this? So to explain all of this, the Rebbe says, we know there's a pasuk that says, Al me of the Eretz, why was the land of Eretz Yisrael destroyed? Al azvam es Teirasi, because they abandoned my Torah. The Chazal, the Gemara says on this. What does it mean they abandoned my Torah? Shaloi beirchu ba Torah tchila, they did not make a bracha on the Torah first. What does this mean? So the Bach explains, and this is also alluded to in Rabbeinu Yoina, that even though these Yidden learned lots of Torah, but what they were lacking was the kavanah, that when they're learning Torah, it's really about becoming connected, becoming one with the kedusha, with the ruchnius of the Torah, and to draw down the Shekhinah into the world. And the words of the Haaretz, the destruction of the land, doesn't only mean in the simple sense that the land was destroyed because of that, but what it means is that without learning the Torah in that way, so the land itself remained in a way, in a desolate way, in a destroyed way, in a very materialistic way, in the sense that the Shekhinah cannot go through there. In other words, in Torah we have two ideas. We have, of course, the concept of learning Torah with understanding, and then there is the idea that a person has the dveikus, the oneness, the connection to the noisen HaTorah, to Hashem. That is the idea of the kedusha of the Torah, the essence of Torah, which is higher than logic, higher than seichel. The order in this needs to be that first and foremost, even before one learns Torah, there needs to be the dedication, the dveikus, the connection to the very essence of Torah, to the way Torah is higher than seichel. As the Gemara puts it, that there needed to be the idea of making the bracha of the Torah tchila. Number one is the bracha for the Torah. Then comes the learning in a way of understanding. Says the Rebbe, this is the simple explanation why the Torah starts with a Beis and not with an Aleph. Aleph represents that which comes first and foremost. Beis is what comes second. So, in other words, when a Yid is reading the Torah and learning the Torah, this is already the second aspect of Torah itself. This is the second point in Torah. Number one, the Aleph of Torah is the connection to the noisen HaTorah, the connection that the Torah itself has and that the person has to the giver of the Torah, to the essence of Hashem, the way Hashem is higher than any words and letters. And that all comes before the Beis, before the Bereishis of Torah. In other words, that's all the preparation before we start learning Torah. That's the Aleph. And this, says the Rebbe, would be now the explanation on one of the things we said before. What about the Torah in Atzilus, or higher than Atzilus? Why is it starting with the Beis there? So the Rebbe says because this is true on every level of Torah. Even the Torah in Atzilus, even higher than Atzilus, it always starts with a Beis. Because in every single aspect of Torah that we're going to look in every level, there's always going to be these two stages. There's the Torah, the way it already is coming down and being revealed in certain words and letters, in the Beis of Bereishis and so on. But then there's always that element, the noisen HaTorah, the way Hashem, the giver of the Torah, which is completely higher than words and letters. The Rebbe says, we discussed many times, that all the pirushim within one word or one concept are always connected to each other. And the Rebbe says, in a similar way we can explain over here, that the three explanations that we brought earlier in regards to why the Torah starts with a Beis really are all coming from one general point, one general theme. And which point is that? This explanation that we just said, the simple explanation that what is the Aleph of Torah? The connection with that level which is beyond logic, with the essence of Hashem. And the base of Torah, that's when we learn Torah b'havana v'hasaga. And this idea expresses itself then into three different ideas and the three explanations that we said before, which would be three specific aspects of Torah and Torah's impact on the person and the world. And that's what these three other explanations will be, but they're all deriving from that one general point. How does this work? So the Rebbe says, first of all, in regards to Torah itself, we're going to have the Pirush of Kabbalah, that the Aleph of Torah is the Torah in Atzilus, and the base of Torah is the Torah the way it's in Bria. The Rebbe is going to explain each one of these things soon. The Rebbe is, in brief, going through the 3 points and going to show us how they're all connected with a general idea. The second idea is the effect in the person that's learning Torah. In other words, when the person feels in the Torah that all of the understanding that he has, that's only stage number 2. Because really there's something higher than that. Then the way he learns the Torah is in a way of Beis, which is an expression of bracha, not chas v'shalom, in a way of an aleph, which will be an expression of arira. And finally, the effect that Torah has in the world, that when a Yid learns Torah in the proper way, that first there's that aleph of Torah. In other words, recognizing again the noise in our Torah, this itself actually helps fixing up that northern side that we said before, which is not closed off, which, as we said, this is the concept of what the base represents, and as we will see now, the continuation of the explanation. The Rebbe says, what does it mean making the bracha and the Torah first? It doesn't only mean that we have the kavanah of the neshama being connected to Hashem, but rather this itself is the introduction and brings to the learning of the Torah. In other words, it's not two separate things, but this itself will now influence the way we learn Torah. As the Chazal say, that it needed to be Berchul b'Torah Tchila, which means that first there's the bracha of the Torah, but then of course you do need to come to the next stage of learning Torah with understanding. Says the Rebbe, from this we understand that this is going to express itself, first of all within the Torah itself that you're learning, also in the person that's learning Torah, and the impact that it has on the world. And now the Rebbe explains the 3 points. Number 1, when a Yid learns Torah, without that dedication and devotion and connection to the noise in our Torah, then the Torah that one learns, chas v'shalom, is being separated, is being removed from Elikus, to the extent that it could even be feeding chayas to klipos chas v'shalom. Says the Rebbe, this is hinted in the fact that the Roshei Tevis of the word Bereishis is the idea of the Torah the way it is in the world of Bria. We said Beis, we said, is the Torah the way it came down in the world of Bria. Because as Chassidus and Kabbalah explain, Bria is the place where there's already pirud, separation. This is where the separation starts in the world of Bria. Whereas when you're learning Torah with that introduction of Berchul b'Torah Tchila, making the bracha first, then the Torah is being learned completely in a way that it's united with Hashem. In other words, the Torah is in an Atzilus type of state, a world of Achdus, a world of unity, a world which is referred to. And the attitude of that world is Elikus b'pshitus and Metzius b'yischachos, which means that the given thing over there is godliness. Anything else, any world or any creation, that's already the novelty. The obvious thing in the world of Atzilus is Elikus. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, the Rebbe says, Chazal tell us, when a Yid learns Torah in the proper way, then it becomes for him a Sam Chaim, a potion for life. On the other end, if not Chaz v'Shalom, then it's the opposite. Says the Rebbe, this is the other idea that we say, that the Beis is a lashon of bracha, and the Aleph is the opposite, is a curse. In other words, when the Yid learns Torah in a way of Zacha, Zacha means merit, but it also means in a pure way, in a clean way. In other words, that he feels the Kedushas HaTorah, then, if that's the Aleph of the Torah of him, so then automatically, when he starts learning the Torah in a way of Seichel, then it will be in a way of Beis, of Bracha, which will mean that it will be for him a Sam Chaim, it will be a potion of life. On the other hand, if loy zacha, meaning to say, if when the person starts learning Torah, it's right away as if that is the aleph of Torah, as if that's number one, he's lacking the zacha, he's lacking the kedushas HaTorah, he's lacking the true aleph of the Torah, the kedushas HaTorah, the way it's connecting us with the essence of Hashem, then chas v'shalom arachmon litzlan, the aleph is an expression of a curse. It's a samisa. Finally, the Rebbe says, in regards to point number 3, in order that the Torah should accomplish and should affect, should impact the world, that the world should feel that yesh balabayis lebirazu, that the world has a boss. This is when we sense and when we feel in the Torah that we're learning, we feel the noise in our Torah, we feel Hashem. And this is the idea of that shape of the letter Beis, which is, as we said, similar to the world that's closed off on 3 sides, and the northern side is not closed off, which teaches us that when we learn Torah, and we recognize it, that it's the Beis, because we feel that this learning is only, the logical part is only stage number 2, but there was first number 1, the aleph, the fact that there is the noise in our Torah, and that we recognize in the Torah itself, then that itself helps, that the world itself is also fixed up. The world itself also feels that the Eibishter is the balabos, that the Eibishter is the boss, and then the world, in fact, does become fixed up, not in the way that it's open from the other side, but completely the way it's supposed to be. Says the Rebbe, according to all of this, we're also going to understand the reason why this came by Talmai HaMelech, when they translated the Torah, it was as if the Torah starts with an aleph. Because everything we discussed up until now, that the learning of Torah with our understanding, we always have to remember and feel that that's number Beis. And that before that there's something way higher. That's only Shayach by Yidden, but not by Ummei So'ilam. Why is that? The din is, the halacha is, that a guy that learns Torah is chayiv misa. That is, a person that's not a Yid is not allowed to learn Torah for the sake of Torah itself. Yes, he is allowed to learn Torah, as much as it's relevant for him to fulfill the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, but not beyond that. Says the Rebbe, since the Limud Torah by the Ummei So'ilam is in order to know practically what they have to do, so it's understood that which level do they have a shaykhus to in Torah? Only those levels that are within understanding, but not to that level of the essence of Torah, which is completely beyond understanding. This is something that comes, as we said, through making the bracha on the Torah first. That's only shaykh to Yidden, as is understood from the lashon, from the expression of the bracha itself, the Birchas HaTorah. What do we say? Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'nasan lanu es Torah soy. This is why when the Skenim come to translate the Torah for Talmai HaMelech, which means, as the Torah is being translated in a way that it has to do with B'nai Noach, how does it come out over there? As if it says Elokim bara Bereishis, meaning starting with an aleph, because for the goy, yes, the learning of the Torah, the understanding of the Torah, that's not step number 2. That is the first thing and the only thing. The Rebbe concludes the Sicha by saying that we know that Parshas Bereishis, we start reading on Simchas Torah. And this thing is, this idea of Simchas Torah is also connected to all of this. Simchas Torah, as we know, we dance with the Torah, and it's specifically through dancing with our feet, as it says, through this we take the essence of Torah. It says in the Zohar that we are noyeg, we have the custom to make a tremendous simcha with the Torah. It's called Simchas Torah, and we crown the Sefer Torah with its keser. We put on the keser, the crown. We rejoice with a crown. That means that the simcha of Torah is connected specifically with adorning the Sefer Torah with its crown. What's the idea of a keser, of a crown? We know keser is above, higher than the head. This represents the hamshacha of the Ein Sof in Torah, meaning that connection of Torah and the Yidden with the Noisein HaTorah. Says the Rebbe, through this, through having and preparing ourselves through this simcha and this hamshacha, we could then, within Simchas Torah itself, start then going ahead after connecting with a Noisein HaTorah. Then we start reading and learning Bereishis, which starts with a Beis, that we could sense that the whole learning of our Torah is already the second stage, because the beginning of the Torah is that dedication, that devotion to the Noisein HaTorah.